Hi there, I'm Brian McCarthy from Turn to Wisdom, and I've got an amazing guest with me this morning, Stephen Sutton. So, hi Stephen, it's so good to see you this morning. Thank you very much for coming
Thank you
along.
for having me.
Oh, wow. So,
Mm,
and I've been praying for church unity,
mm,
and it just absolutely floored me. I went along to TVCC, and you'd managed to get people from all denominations. There was Catholic priests, there was people from all denominations, 1,300 people.
yeah,
Yeah,
it was huge. Yeah,
there was no seats left, there was no carpet left, and it just totally blew my mind that you'd managed to mobilise all those people together. So anyway, that's how come I got to know you, and since then we've had a right adventure. But I'd love to ask you, so church unity, what is it that put church unity in your heart?
mm. Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you for having me, Brian. It's wonderful to chat to you. And yeah, I guess my story with Church Unity it coincided with me moving up here to Teesside. So we were down in London, training as a Baptist minister, and then God called us up here to a church in South Middlesbrough called Colbingham Baptist Church at the time, and it was yeah, just a little church. And some of the language that we used around calling and ministry at the time was very much about the church. So it was, am I called to the church? Is the church going to call me to be its pastor? Is that why we're being called up here? It was very much me and the church and me trying to make that discerning call. And so we made that discerning call, and we felt God call us to move to the church and become its pastor. But then within the first year, I reckon it changed for me. And quite distinctly, I felt God speak over me that my calling wasn't to the church, but it was to the land, to Teesside.
Wow.
Almost like you are called to be the pastor of the church, but your calling isn't to the church. Your calling is to the land of Teesside. So you
Yep.
are, and I felt like God was saying, you've got to take this land more seriously because it's the land to which I've called you. And this scripture, to be honest, Jeremiah 29 has been a scripture over my life in many different ways at different seasons. And around that time, it was very much being called to the city to which I've called you. Seek the peace and the prosperity of that place.
Yeah.
And I'm like, this sort of amazing passage where God's calling people. He's placed them in Babylon, which is not where they want to be. It's not a city where they feel at home in, like they're slaves over there in Babylon. And God's like, no, I've called you here. I'm the one who sent you here. And while you're here in that place,
Yep.
you can consider yourself as placed people. And so it's not random this, you're not just ended up here. I've placed you there. And I felt that God was saying that to me is this isn't random. It's not just the location of Colbingham Baptist Church, and that's the important thing. You are deliberately here in Teesside, you're placed here. And so I kind of started taking the place of Teesside, our city, our towns, here much more seriously. Started praying bigger prayers, not just prayers for my church, but prayers for the place and for the people of the place and for the future of the place. Started reading about the history of the place, and it
Wow.
kind of really shifted my relationship with God, my relationship with ministry, and the way that I was leading my church as well. Because suddenly it wasn't just, hey, how do I lead my church into growth? It was, how do I lead my church into the city that He's placed us to? How do
Wow.
we fulfill our calling as a church to our city? And so, what happens though, Brian, is when you start dreaming up bigger dreams because you're placed in a city and not just in a church, you start to realize, oh, well, I can't just rely on me and my own gifting and my own skills,
Yep.
which I probably can for church leadership. I could probably do a bit of that. I can,
I would
I've
vouch
been
for that.
trained. I can read the Bible. I can preach some sermons. I can do a bit of that by myself. But when you start saying, oh, no, what if God's got a calling for me to bring the kingdom transformation of an entire region? Like, I can't do that by myself. So you start lifting your head up and start looking around, and you start realizing, God's not placed me here by myself. I'm not the only one who's called to Teesside, but actually there are hundreds of other churches knocking around and thousands of other Christians knocking around, and all of them are placed here in Teesside, not by accident, not because it was like a random thing, but they're placed by God, sent by God to Teesside for the kingdom transformation of Teesside, for God's mission here on Teesside. And so out of that, I'm kind of like, I just had this burden birthed that, well, if I've got this big vision for the kingdom transformation of Teesside and other people have also got that, we got to know each other. We got to work together. We got to relate to each other.
Yeah.
And so that kind of was how it was birthed within me. And we just started trying to meet people, particularly as a church leader in Teesside, started to get around, particularly Middlesbrough at that time, because that's the part of Teesside I was from, just visiting, having coffees with different church leaders and really starting to get to know them. There was one point, though, where it did shift for us. Interrupt me if I'm carrying on ahead.
This is great.
But there was one point where it shifted for us, I guess, and that was I'd just been getting to know a few church leaders, building relationships, and then there was a guy from York who came up, and he was like the Archbishop's evangelist. He was the Archbishop of York's evangelist, a guy called Roger Simpson, I think he was called. Amazing guy, and he called a meeting of some church leaders in Middlesbrough, said that the Archbishop wants to do a mission in Middlesbrough. So can we get some church leaders together? So I think there were about 7 or 8 church leaders at that meeting, just from Middlesbrough. And we had a chat about how the Archbishop Sentamu is going to come to Middlesbrough at some point and do a mission. And we planned a mission together and it was great. But he made this throwaway comment at the end of the meeting that changed everything for us from that moment. He said, "Hey, how often do you guys pray together here as church leaders in Middlesbrough?"
Yeah.
And I said, "Oh, well, every now and again we get together and we have a churches together meeting, and we do pray a little bit at the end of that." And he said, "All right, well, in York we've been praying together for like 19, 20 years, and we've prayed together every Tuesday morning at 8 o'clock in the morning for 19 or 20 years." And I remember as he said it, something happened in the room. It was almost like the Holy Spirit landed that throwaway comment at the end of the meeting on a few of our hearts, and it stuck with us. And just in that moment, we had this conviction. And I remember there was probably about 4 of us who really had a conviction about this, and we're just like, well, we've got to do that. We who's praying for Middlesbrough? Who's praying for Teesside? And if it's not the church leaders at Teesside, then who is it? And so we should be praying for it. And so, it was me and Terry Young and Eric Wilson at St. Barnabas Church. There was a Methodist guy called Martin Ramsden. And we just started praying together on Tuesday mornings. And it was just beautiful because what we realized quite quickly is that there was a real power in regular prayer together. Not only in answered prayer, which you're praying for and you see in answered prayer, but also in what it does between your relationships and the barriers that you have between each other. Yeah. So I guess before that, there is always a little bit of a competitive element between, not always, sorry, there was at the beginning a competitive element between different churches. You know, that sort of, oh, is their church growing more than my church? Is their church bigger? I don't know what their theology is on that. I don't know what they believe in that. There's some barriers between you as different streams of Christianity. Yeah. But when you pray together regularly, all of that just disappears. All those barriers, they sort of tumble down because it's just me and it's Brian and we're praying together and we're praying for the same things. And then when you keep on doing that, you realize that as your church is growing and thriving, that's my victory as well, because I've been praying for it with you. And so I'm like, oh, come on, Brian's church is thriving and growing, and that's my prayers being answered. And then similarly, if your church is struggling and in pain, then no longer am I sitting there feeling smug, thinking, oh, my church is doing all right, actually. I'm heartbroken because I've been praying for your church. So we share stuff together, and I remember at first when we started praying together, it's a little bit awkward because you are trying to think, oh, I wonder how do you pray and what's your theology around that? And there's those little barriers. But again, the more you pray, it's less about all that, and it's just about being children of God and coming before our Father. And so now I reckon that was 13 odd years ago now, Brian, 13, 14 years ago now. So we've been praying as church leaders in Middlesbrough, and Stockton also had a prayer meeting as well where they were praying together, and we've now brought them together, and our sort of Teesside churches pray together now. And we've been doing that every Tuesday morning, around 8 o'clock on a Tuesday morning for about 13 years.
Wow.
And it's powerful. It's powerful when brothers and sisters stand in unity together and God commands a blessing over it. And something about the long-term unity of brothers and sisters in Christ praying for the place where they've been sent to is powerful. And I believe that some of the fruit that we are seeing across the UK, but across Teesside right now, is because of those prayers and because of that unity and because of the blessing that God has commanded over us because of that unity.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that is beautiful, what you've just been saying there. It's amazing. And bringing people together every Tuesday morning breaks down the barriers, because naturally as human beings we're trying to do our job well, we're trying to look after the little patch of land that we've got, but actually feeling like you've been placed here because you were brought here from Manchester then by God, feeling like you've been placed here, because the Israelites, they were completely taken out of the land that God had given to Abraham and taken into Babylon. But God was saying, no, just relax. Pray for this place because this is where I've put you. So, make no mistake, we're exactly where we're supposed to be.
Totally. Yeah, totally. It just changes. And I focus on church leaders there, but that really is a message to every believer, is where you find yourself now, okay, that's where you're placed. It's not an accident. And now it's not that God can't move you on and he could call you to different places, different jobs, different environment. He definitely can. But where you are right now, accept that as the place where you've been placed and strategically placed.
Yeah.
And if every believer really starts operating with that mindset, it changes. Because suddenly your faith is not just about attending church on a Sunday morning. It's about that workplace, that community, that shopping centre, that family environment, that wider local community I'm a part of. I'm a sent person of God into that place. God's put me there very deliberately. Why has he put me there? What does he want me to do while I'm there? How do I seek the peace, the shalom of that location, that workplace, that part of town that you're placed in? And I love the word shalom because it's a massive kingdom word. It's not just, doesn't mean just peace.
No.
It doesn't mean just, if there's a battle going on, let's bring peace there. It means wholeness, completeness, harmony. It's God's vision of kingdom. It's God's vision of heaven on earth. Yeah. Seek that. What is heaven when it comes to earth? What does Jesus' kingship look like when it meets your workplace? Seek that when you're in that place.
Wow,
and that changes. And I really love what then unity, the vision of unity, does to that. Because if I'm an individual that is called into my workplace, so let's pretend I'm a doctor or a nurse in the big hospital, James Cook Hospital.
Yeah.
If my role as a Christian is not just attend church, do some nice devotions, and then get on with my job, but my role in that hospital is as a placed person of God, seeking shalom, seeking kingdom, having an ear out for what is the Holy Spirit doing and how do I play my role in that, then that's powerful. That's a powerful shift. But then it becomes even more powerful when you begin to lift your head up and go, God's also got other kingdom-placed people in the same hospital I'm working in who are also called to seek shalom and peace and kingdom. What happens if I start working in unity with those people? What happens if, it doesn't matter what church they go to, what stream of Christianity they're a part of, but they're Jesus' sent people in that place. So what happens if I start lifting my head up and go, hey, we are on a shared mission and we've been sent by the same God into the same location. How do we share some of that together? And I'm like, I remember one time in prayer, God gave me this image, a prophetic image, I think, of a great big map of Teesside with loads of pins just placed in it, thousands of pins placed in it.
I remember you saying this,
I've shown it on screen a couple of times at a few events. And thousands of pins just placed in this map. And this image of God saying, those are the people that I've placed in Teesside. And they are strategically placed.
Wow.
And I'm like, and they're not just placed where the churches gather on a Sunday. they are scattered out into every nook and cranny of Teesside.
Yeah.
And they're salt and light people, kingdom-called people, shalom-seeking people. Now, if you wanted to really impact an area, like, what would be the best strategy? It would be to scatter amazing salt and light people all over the place in every single workplace, and like there are thousands of them everywhere.
You make me think of it,
It's
Jesus,
amazing.
because he talked about yeast, didn't he?
Oh,
And
that's
the yeast
exactly
in
the
the dough,
image.
and it
Yeah.
spreads all through.
All of those images about tiny little things having massive impact. So a tiny little bit of yeast, but spread throughout the dough, has a massive impact.
Yeah.
A tiny bit of salt rubbed all over the meat has a transformative, preservative, flavouring impact upon that lump of meat. And you're like, well, if Teesside is the lump of meat or the dough, then God has scattered out really strategically his people.
Yeah.
And I think it is powerful when people have that ownership that they are placed people. But it becomes even more powerful when they realise they're not on their own in that place. But God's got other people in the same work, in the same sort of work environments as they are, with similar stuff. And we're like,
Well, you're reminding
that's the
me,
power
'cause,
of unity.
well, I was in the Christian Police Association.
Which is exactly why I loved getting to know you, Brian, when you worked for the police as well, is because that's what you're doing. You, as a Christian Police Association, you were gathering people who were in the sector of policing for Cleveland Police, saying, guys, you're not just a personal devotion Christian, but you're a kingdom-seeking, like, you're powerful, and we can do something together when we unite together.
That's true. We used to pray for Cleveland Police. I mean, I still pray for Cleveland Police, but we were in the seats, the places where the big meetings would take place, and we'd be praying for God to bless our leaders, because that's scriptural as well, isn't it? 1 Timothy 2 and Romans 13. Pray for the people who in power, because then you can lead peaceful and quiet lives. It's very, very similar to the Jeremiah 29 scriptures.
And I also think there's something spiritual there. I think there's an authority that a police officer can have in prayer over the policing sector of your area that I, as a church leader, can't have. Do you know what I mean? I don't know what it is. It doesn't add up to, but there's something about police officers gathering together for prayer over the leadership of the police and the strategy of the police, or whatever's going on crime-wise in a city, that has an authority to it.
I think you're right, because not only are you called to an area, but called to a career or a vocation.
Exactly, yeah, and that's it. And your area, actually, where you're placed, might not be sometimes it's a geographical location. Sometimes it's a network of people, or a community of people. Sometimes it's a workplace and an office. Sometimes it's a regional role, like you had with Cleveland Police. And so, there's different. What's the place you're sent to, and placed in? But it might not be a geographical place, but it could be.
Okay, right. No, this is absolutely brilliant. I love it. And you reminded me, I spoke to Deborah Green from Redeeming Our Communities in Manchester, and she knew you when you were a kid. You were running around the living room while they were having
they were in a church just up the road from ours, and good friends with they were church leaders, and my dad was a church leader, and so they knew each other, and we used to go to things like Spring Harvest together and things like that. So I grew up with our kids. Yeah.
And you've just said something, so I wonder if it's something that you already kind of grew up with, but praying for the area where you are, but finding out about the area. So what Deborah found out about Manchester was that they are kind of entrepreneurial, the groundbreakers, because the first computer was made in Manchester and so on. So we're just celebrating 200 years of the Stockton to Darlington Railway. Stockton's in Teesside. The River Tees runs through Darlington. So the railway, the passenger railway, started here and went across the world.
Yeah.
The friction match was made in John Walker Square. You know, we are places where we can start a fire that will spread. We can be like that yeast. So, what did you find out about Teesside when you started looking in?
I mean, all sorts. I mean, in a way, we're a relatively young area compared to a lot of places in the UK. But I guess a lot of our history is within the Industrial Revolution, within like steel and iron ore and all of that sort of work stuff. And I love the image that we're bridge builders.
Wow.
Like there's like some of the most famous bridges. I was in Sydney and looking at that massive harbour bridge, and it's built by Teesside Steel. And you're like, and I love that. Like, some of the most significant bridges all around the world have come out of Teesside. And I think there is something about a word over Teesside with bridge builders. I think there's something within that. There's spiritually, I think there's a humility to Teesside that God has blessed, and I think it's one of the reasons we've seen church unity flourish so much in this area, particularly, is because of that. There's a spiritual humility. There's some places that don't have that, and it's funny when you are in different cities. They do have different gifts, but also different weaknesses as well. And there's a humility that I feel about Teesside that has made it fertile soil for the work of unity. Because you need to be humble to do unity. Arrogance kills unity, it really does. And humility really creates an environment where it can grow and flourish. And we've seen that amongst churches, amongst church leaders, just amongst conversations that have happened with different parts of sectors of Teesside as well. I've worked with the council at different times and worked with conversations with police and crime commissions and things like that. So there's a humility and a willingness to listen to each other that's a real gift. And I wonder if that does come from some of the hardship of our history as we had this great boom within the Industrial Revolution, but then as a lot of the northern towns of the UK saw when they boomed in the Industrial Revolution, a great crash, an economic crash, when globalization happened and we're no longer the cheapest steel in the world and people buy it from other places, is lots of pain and hardship that we've been through and as an area, but it's maybe brought about a kindness and a humility to this region that is a gift, and it's a strength to the area, and it's wonderful now. I think we're seeing a reversal of some of those economic fortunes, and we're starting to see a growth in the economy in certain areas, just little bits of it, but I think it's on the up.
I think you're right, and you make my hair stand up. It's a lovely thing that Teesside's got, and it's something that God really strongly values. And Jesus said in the Sermon on the Mount, the meek shall inherit the earth. But I heard recently that when they say meek, it's like a stallion that's been broken. Okay. It's like that power's there, but it chooses to follow its master, but in humility. Great.
And I mean that sort of language is all over Jesus' death, isn't it? This power of God. All in this person of Jesus, but what does he do with that? He lays his life down for the sake of the other, and that's this huge example of humility. So there's a beautifulness to that, and and in fact, just reflect on this season we're in the UK at the moment. There's lots of language around battles and strength and fighting for, and we've got to remember that the true strength of the kingdom of God, the true strength of God, comes in the form of a suffering servant, of someone who's willing to lay his life down for the sake of others.
To serve, it's the most powerful position if you want to be a leader. There's the power of
humility.
Wow. Stephen, this is this is gold. So for the people that's listening, they may not have the unity in their churches. They might be looking. So a great start is to pray together.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, if you're, I guess I'm a bit of an expert in how we do that amongst church leaders. But I think all believers should be considering, hey, how do we build relationships and pray together across our area that we're sent to, with other churches, with other streams of Christianity.
I'm sorry for interrupting you, but Deborah Green says that. So reimagine the street where you live.
Totally.
If you managed to love your neighbour and your neighbour loved you, what difference would that make to you? Even if you loved the people in your house. So it's like praying for where God's placed you in the microscopic scale as well as
that's it. And then so who else has he placed you with? So I think that's it. So it's we're not often placed alone. Sometimes people will find that they're placed alone, and that's hard call. More often than not, though, we're not placed alone. There are other people God has placed there with us. Start viewing those people as teammates. Now, it might not flourish straight away, but if they are your team and God's placed them with you, do you know what? You're probably going to have to get to know them. So have a coffee with them.
Yeah.
Ask them about their family. How are they doing? How's their marriage? How are their kids? Just get to know them. Like, just be friendly with each other. It doesn't all have to be great big strategy straight away. Let's build friendships. That's basically what I started doing 13 years ago. Is I felt God say to me, challenge me to have a coffee with 2 church leaders a week.
Wow.
And so I sectioned that off for a long time. I had coffee with 2 church leaders a week just to get around and get to know people. And I wasn't selling them anything. I wasn't saying, hey, here's a great vision for church unity. Let's do this together. I would just like, if we're teammates, we should know each other. And just through that, you build a trust with each other, don't you? If God's going to do anything through your unity with another believer, there's got to be a level of trust there. Because people won't work with you if they don't trust you.
No.
And to have trust with you, they've got to know you to a certain extent. And so you can't be best friends with everybody, but you can build friendships. And I found, one of the things I found is how easy it is to build friendships, actually. It doesn't take long. Like, if you actually listen to somebody, talk to them, ask them how they're doing, pray over them, let them know that you want good things for them, encourage them, then actually you build friendships quite quickly and easily. And so if you're a church leader watching this and you're thinking, I want to develop unity amongst, just call up the neighbouring churches and just start with building relationships. If you're a doctor in a hospital, or if you're work for the council as a cleaner, then start looking around the offices that you work in, the places, like, who else has God placed you with? Are there any other teammates? Make a beeline for them. Let's start building relationships and start say, hey, God's called you here and He's called me here. Should we start praying for this? And then all you have to do is just follow what God says. Like, because if you're praying together, inevitably the Holy Spirit's going to start bubbling something up within you, and then be obedient to that. He'll start bubbling things up, and you're going, as we're praying, this is on our heart. We've got a burden for this. I think maybe we could do this simple thing. I think maybe we could start dreaming up this bigger vision and start being obedient to it and just following the Holy Spirit. But you can't do any of that if you're not praying together and if you don't know each other and trust each other. So
no, that's such great advice. And you are a practitioner of this. You came in my house today, asked straight away about my wife and about my kids and how my weekend was. But you're genuinely interested, but you've remembered the things we talked about before, and you're asking me how things went.
Yeah, but it's not rocket science, is it? It's just let's be nice people.
Yeah.
Let's actually care for each other.
Because God's not he's not gonna like come along and put this big saddle on you.
No.
But what He'll do is, if we are going to be big meek stallions, I'm not suggesting for 1 minute I'm a big stallion, right? But anyway, but that I'm like God's like thing that's going to use for this big movement. But we've all got a part to play, and He won't give us that part until we've had practice and training, and He does, and it starts really small, and just this, and
it often does. Yeah.
But it's like the big things are actually in the really, really small things. Jesus, the Pharisees come and say, what's the greatest commandment? He says, love God and love your neighbour as yourself.
Yeah.
So like, keep it dead simple. If you do that, then He'll start to give you more people to
no, totally.
love.
No, be honourable with the stuff that God's given to you. And then he starts trusting you with more and more. It's just one of them kingdom principles. And he takes stuff as small as a mustard seed and he starts growing it into these mustard plants that take over whole gardens. And it's just the way the kingdom works. It really is. And so look around you. What's God given to you? What teammates has He placed you amongst? What gifts has He given to you? Like, just start being honourable with those things and start. And then the key thing really is obedience. So when God does start bubbling something up, laying something on your heart, start birthing something in prayer, like, are you just going to pray about it and talk about it? Or are you going to do something about it? Like, be obedient with it. So then step forward in obedience.
Wow. Just what you said there. So God put it in your heart to go and have coffee with 2 different church leaders a week.
Yeah, and I probably did that for about 8-9 years. Probably did that as a practice.
But you were obedient.
Yeah. You've got to, like you say, you've got to do it. Can't just be a great thought. And to be honest, I'm big on this at the moment, Brad. It's just that I preached a sermon about a year ago on the end of the Sermon on the Mount, and Jesus like, whoever puts these words of mine into practice is like a wise man who built his house upon the rock. And you're like, the key thing is putting it into practice. So not just like, we are consumers of information right now, aren't we? Like, we live in this world where you can consume the world's information non-stop all the time. So many voices, so much information, so much wisdom, good stuff. So some of it's rubbish, but some of it's really good stuff. But we just become fat on knowledge unless we walk it off and we do something about it and we put it into practice. It's got to be, you got to think, so you'd be better to have a little bit of wisdom that you put into practice than a whole load of wisdom and not do anything with it. So do stuff with it. What's God laid in your heart? What are you got to do about it? That's some good questions to have.
Okay. I'm gonna.
We're all over the place with this conversation.
No, I can see exactly where it's going. It's going. So it's where church unity's come from. You felt called to come from Manchester. You felt called to come here and have a coffee with 2 church leaders a week to pray every Tuesday, and from there,
all the things have come.
The momentum's been building and growing. It's like a tree. Like, it grows, doesn't it? It's like a strip of grass at first, but then it stops and it builds and builds and builds.
It does, and it takes a life of it. Well, it takes the life of God, because God starts doing it all in all sorts of different places. So, I guess it did develop and it did grow, and it's still growing now into things that we don't even know about, because God's doing it, which is wonderful. But we started at one point having leaders' lunches together. So every couple of months we'd get leaders together. At first they were sort of, I don't know, we get 10 or 15 leaders. Now we get between 50 on a quiet day, 80 and 90 on a busy day. And the church leaders, and they're from Catholic churches to Pentecostal churches to Methodist churches to Baptist churches, all getting together and really praying for Teesside, asking each other how you're doing, start discerning what God is saying to us collectively as the church. So they've been wonderful times over the years, done them for a lot of years now, haven't we? You've been involved in those for a long time.
It's amazing.
And then out of that is when you are having those conversations and those prayer times together, and you've got the trust, you can see what God's bubbling up. So some of the things that we've discerned over the years is hey, what is God doing in our area? So it was really useful in the pandemic. We were trying to discern together, what is God doing through the pandemic? And we were able to start charting and tracking that God's doing something really exciting in the pandemic. Because although our churches were really struggling and we're not meeting together, new people were coming to Christ all the time. And as we emerged out of the pandemic, we realized that the landscape spiritually was different. And it wasn't just me as my church, the Beacon Church, noticing that was different. We were spotting all across the area that the church is different and the environment we're ministering is different. And we were sharing these stories. And then we felt that God was starting to tell us that, and God brought along this amazing organization called the Luis Palau Association, who are experts in citywide evangelism. And we started all together as the churches having conversations about how we do evangelism better across a whole city region, not just as our individual churches. And this vision was birthed to do a citywide evangelism festival that we called Festival Teesside. And it was a year ago now, last summer 2024. And we got together, we had a partnership of around 70 churches, all working together strategically to proclaim the gospel to as many people as possible over a summer period. And it culminated in a great big park festival with musicians and gospel proclamation and fun fairground rides and things like that. And we went into prisons, we went into homeless shelters, we went into schools. And we across that weekend, we proclaimed the gospel to thousands. So at the actual park, we had about 30,000 people who would have heard the gospel proclaimed. But across the whole week, there was probably another 10,000 added onto that heard the gospel proclaimed. And so we went from like being these these individual churches, and it's worth noting, Brian, like we're not got any mega churches in Teesside. We're the vast majority of us are small local community churches that have just been plugging away. But together we birthed this vision where maybe 50-odd thousand people heard the gospel across the summer of 2024.
Yeah.
And through that, again, we're seeing another shift in the environment we're ministering in. It's almost like that unity. I just remember we had this closing worship set at the last night of Festival Teesside, and all these people gathered together worshipping God in the outdoors, and it felt like we're worshipping over Teesside.
Yeah.
And it was, I just had this real sense that God's doing something spiritually as we do this in unity together. And it was putting the enemy on the back foot, and it was Jesus putting his foot down on Teesside and saying, this is my territory, this is my turf.
Yeah.
And I think what we're seeing now, a year on, is we're walking in the fruit of Jesus claiming this territory and the enemy backing off. And it wasn't that our churches were suddenly full after that weekend, but I tell you what, there are so many stories of, compared to a year ago, 2 years ago, churches all across Teesside are now planting new churches, churches that are doubling their services because they've reaching capacity, of new believers just walking into churches saying, I've got to give my life to Christ. I had 3 people yesterday give their life to Christ at our church who never, 2 of them I'd never met before. And we're operating in a different environment. And again, it's not just in a church, it's across the church. We're seeing a different environment that we're operating in. And again, I believe it's something God's doing all across the UK, which is so exciting. But I think it's the fruit of unity. Yeah.
Definitely. I definitely can see it. Wow. So from bringing you here, not realising what the purpose was, but you've been very much allowed to be and encouraged to be and accepted as the kind of focus of this transforming Teesside Together movement. You've been the catalyst for...
I'm okay with the word catalyst. Yeah. Unity is a hard one to put leadership on because it's so different. Unity leadership is so different from secular leadership or even church growth leadership. It's actually a very different thing. Catalyst is a better word. Unity does need catalysts.
Because you stand in a room full of people who are all leaders in their own right, but because you've built those relationships, they trust you to speak for everybody. And as a group, transforming Teesside Together, you meet together for these leaders' lunches, like you say, between 50 and 80 leaders, and you bring along some amazing guest speakers like the Palaus, the Evangelical Alliance are coming up to speak to us at the next one. Just rewind it a little bit to 2024. And we spoke to somewhere about 50,000 people. There was people doing football tricks, BMX tricks, and there was helter-skelters. Oh man, there was kids getting their face painted. There was people singing along with their arms up to the music and everything. Yet the Church of Teesside threw a party for the community of Teesside. And it was for the people of Teesside. It wasn't just for people. The folk from the church came along as stewards in order that the people of Teesside could have that party, that safe space. And do you know what was really amazing was the weather was terrible in the way up to the festival.
Oh, it was miraculous what we had, yeah.
Look, Makepeace is an amazing organiser, and he was coming up day after day. He was driving up from Northampton to check the ground we could actually have this, and they put some ground stabilisation in and stuff. But as we packed up after that, when you were saying Jesus put his foot on Teesside, and we started packing up, and the rain started. And if the rain had come 2 days earlier,
Brian, it was the most beautiful. It was total miracle. Yeah, non-stop rain for a month before, and then the rain stopped just before the festival, just before the ground got sodden and it was about to be cancelled.
Yeah.
Hot sunshine all weekend, like baking sunshine, needed sunscreen on all weekend. And then we sung the final song on the final night, and the heavens opened and it rained. Not one drop of rain had happened till that final song was sung. And so much rain fell that night that we were told that if the rain had come any earlier, the whole thing would have been cancelled.
It would have been cancelled. I was
And
there
so
the next morning.
It was just one of those beautiful moments where you're like, oh, we haven't just done our own thing, we have done what God asked us to do. And you need those confirmations sometimes when you're leading through a vision and you're thinking, oh, has God told us to do this? And it would just confirm time and time again, yeah, this is what God had asked us to do.
Exactly.
So.
And how many decisions for Christ do you think there was in that week?
I mean, officially, they kept records of people who had made first-time responses and things like that, and there was 2,800.
Wow.
So it was a lot of first-time decisions. And obviously, you've got to put these into context. You've got to say not all those people were in church the next Sunday after, but it was a part of their faith journey.
Yeah.
And we're going to be reaping the rewards of the sowing of the seeds and the harvest that happened at that moment for many, many years. I think we're going to look back on that time. And there'll be a lot of people who, even in 20 years' time, I think, will have baptism testimonies, being baptized in 20 years, where the first time they heard the gospel was at Festival Teesside.
Wow.
So that's what we're praying for. We're praying for a long-term impact for that. But also spiritually, like what has happened with claiming the spiritual turf of Teesside for Jesus. And that I don't think that can be done by one church effectively. I think that is only done when the church stands in unity and we say, Jesus, this is your land, and we speak united against the enemy, because the enemy's had kind of a foothold here in Teesside for a long time. There's a lot of parts of this area where he's locked in and he's claimed as his own. And I felt spiritually what we were doing is we were knocking him off of those footholds and claiming it for Jesus.
Wow. I think this is going to be a great encouragement to a lot of people who watch this video. And if you are thinking about unity, pray, ask God what he wants you to do, and he'll show you the tiny baby step that he wants you to, whether it's like praying every Tuesday or whether it's having a coffee with a couple of people, making friends with people. It's the thing that God made us for.
And just dreaming up kingdom stuff. I love the question, Brian, I mean, kingdom was Jesus' biggest message, the thing he banged on about the most. And so and I love the idea of, like, what does a place look like if Jesus was to become king? So just start dreaming that question up. So your workplace, if Jesus was to become king over that workplace tomorrow, like what would it change? What would look different? And then all the things that you start writing down and dreaming up and thinking about as that question's on your mind, that's your mission. That's why you're placed there, is to establish Jesus' kingship there. And so, it's going to look like a huge range of things. It might look like poverty being wiped out. It might look like a really healthy, forgiving environment of workplace. It might look like love and self-sacrifice reigning there. It may look like worship happening in that place. It may look like prayer happening in that place. Start dreaming it up. What does it actually look like for Jesus to become king in that? And see what bubbles up out of those conversations and prayers as you start dreaming that up.
Wow. Well, I think that is the natural end point of this. So, yeah. Dream.
Thank you.
dream that Jesus is the king in your street, in your workplace, in your community, and ask yourself what that looks like. Write it down. Start praying into it, and he'll tell you what to do.
Wonderful.
Stephen, thank you so much.
No, thank you for having me. It's been wonderful chatting to you.